All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We are looking at the absolutely incredible rise, fall, and return of a guy who started with practically nothing in an 1895 London slum and somehow became this massive, undeniable global icon. We're going to track a really wild journey today. Fundamentally, this is a story about the ultimate American dream, the invention of modern comedy as we know it, and exactly what happens when an artist's explosive success collides head-on with a really intense political climate.
But we're actually going to kick things off right in the middle of the drama. Picture this, it's 1952, and Charlie Chaplin drops this highly defiant quote, "I don't need America, America needs me." That right there marks the exact moment of his controversial exile from the United States. After 4 decades of practically building the American film industry from the ground up, he suddenly finds himself the target of a grueling government investigation. He was hurt, he was angry, and he left for Europe, seemingly turning his back on the very country that made him a superstar.
So that naturally begs a pretty massive question, right? How did the single most beloved man in Hollywood, a guy who brought literally immense joy to millions of people, become its biggest target? How do you go from being the undisputed king of the American box office to being, well, essentially locked out of the country? To wrap our heads around that fascinating tension, we really have to look back at the foundation of who Charlie Chaplin actually was and why he was so unbelievably driven to succeed in the first place.
And to understand that drive, you have to look at his early life in London, which was defined by just extreme hardship. His father bailed when Charlie was super young. His mom, Hannah, was a stage singer who tragically lost her voice, which completely ended her ability to earn a living, and she eventually became so unwell she had to be hospitalized. By the time Charlie was just 7 years old, he and his brother were thrown into a really harsh government workhouse. But amazingly, it was in that cold, hungry place that he unlocked a kind of superpower. He realized he could make the other sad boys laugh. He figured out early on that performance was a temporary escape from absolute poverty.
It's wild to think about the contrast. Back in 1903 London, Charlie's reality was just this exhausting daily grind. He's 14 years old, acting out physical comedy routines in tiny theaters, sleeping in incredibly cheap hotels, just scraping by on pennies. But fast forward a bit to 1910. He's 21, and he gets this golden ticket to tour America with the theater company. When he steps off the boat in New York, the sheer massive scale of the city completely blows his mind. The buildings are taller, the streets are wider, the whole pace is just roaring. For him, America was quite literally the land of dreams, the one place where a hungry kid from London could actually become somebody. And man, did that dream start to happen fast. By 1913, his crazy physical comedy on stage caught the eye of Max Sennett, the big boss over at Keystone Studios. Sennett saw something totally unique in the way Chaplin moved, so he offered him what was, at the time, an absolute fortune: $150 a week to pack up, move out to Los Angeles, and make movies. Now keep in mind, Chaplin knew absolutely zero about cameras or how film even worked, but for $150 a week, yeah, he was definitely taking that leap.
Actually though, his start in Hollywood in early 1914 was incredibly rocky. Think about it, in the theater, you're trained to act really big so the folks way back in the cheap seats can see you. But on a film set, that camera is right in your face. So Chaplin's early acting was way too chaotic, way too big, and he was constantly clashing with directors. It got so bad that a totally frustrated director finally just threw up his hands and gave Chaplin exactly 30 minutes to go into the dressing room, slap together a funny costume, and see if he could somehow salvage the scene. Literally picture that frantic dressing room scramble. He's just grabbing things, he throws on a jacket that's way too small, he pairs it with pants that are ridiculously big, he finds these massive shoes, grabs a tiny little bowler hat and a cane, and finishes the whole thing off with a small mustache. In 30 minutes of pure panic, he just entirely invented this iconic physical silhouette.
And what walked out of that dressing room was an absolute masterpiece of contradictions. He was poor but proud, small but incredibly brave, sad but hilarious. The genius of it was that audiences everywhere, no matter what language they spoke, instantly understood that universal struggle of being small and broke. They completely fell in love with the Tramp because he never gave up, he always tried to do the right thing, and he always fought back against the bullies. He gave regular, everyday people hope.
That kind of connection, it was an overnight sensation that quickly built a literal empire. The American public could not get enough of him. By 1915, just one single year after that rough, chaotic start, a new studio came knocking with a life-changing contract. And it was a deal that would totally rewrite the balance of power in Hollywood forever.
Just look at this explosive jump. His salary skyrockets from $150 to a staggering $1,250 a week, plus massive bonuses. That is unbelievable money for the era. But honestly, way more important than the cash was the creative control it bought him. He wasn't just a hired actor anymore, he was directing. He controlled the story, the timing, the camera. And with that kind of freedom, he started injecting real, deep human emotion into his slapstick routines. He proved you could make an audience laugh until their sides hurt and then completely break their hearts in the exact same scene.
But you know, his ambition definitely did not stop at a giant paycheck. In 1919, Chaplin helped pull off a massive, revolutionary power shift. He teamed up with huge stars like Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, along with director D.W. Griffith, and they completely broke free from the old studio system, which was notorious for controlling actors and rushing out cheap films. They formed their own company, United Artists. For the very first time, the artists themselves were the bosses. They had the ultimate freedom to take their time and actually focus on making art, not just rushed entertainment.
And that unprecedented freedom? It directly resulted in a string of legendary cinematic masterpieces. In 1921, you get The Kid, which flawlessly blended high comedy with just devastating emotion. In 1925, he spends over a whole year perfecting The Gold Rush, doing things like the famous shoe-eating scene to turn the very real pain of hunger into comedy. And in 1931, with City Lights, he does something completely audacious. He absolutely refuses to use the newly invented synchronized sound. He wanted to prove that his physical body language could transcend spoken words altogether. This hungry kid from the London slums had officially achieved total wealth, independence, and artistic immortality in America.
However, as the world around him was rapidly changing, so was his art. Moving into the late 1930s and the 40s, Chaplin's films started taking on overtly political themes. Now, this shift immediately drew intense scrutiny from the US government. He started making some very powerful enemies who felt that his massive, unprecedented influence over the American public was becoming a genuine liability.
The real turning point here happens in 1940 with The Great Dictator. In this movie, Chaplin tackles dual roles. He plays a Jewish barber who looks an awful lot like the Tramp, and a cruel dictator who is very transparently modeled right on Adolf Hitler. It ends with this incredibly powerful, direct speech about freedom and humanity. Now, while it was a massive box office hit, it was also highly controversial. Newspapers started printing accusations that Chaplin was a communist, and even a traitor to American ideals. His willingness to speak out politically placed a huge target on his back during what was an incredibly paranoid era in US history.
So the timeline escalates pretty rapidly from there. Following that 1940 release, government investigations into his personal life and his politics really ramped up. This tension just simmers and builds for over a decade, until we hit 1952. Chaplin leaves the country for what was supposed to be a simple, routine visit to Europe. But while he is literally mid-ocean on a boat, the US government officially cancels his visa. They stated he couldn't come back unless he submitted to intense questioning about his political beliefs. Shocked and feeling deeply betrayed, Chaplin chose exile, and he relocated his entire family to Switzerland. So, for 20 long years, Charlie Chaplin lives in Europe. He's still making films, sure, but it just wasn't the same. He profoundly missed Hollywood. He missed his friends, and he missed the country where he had built his entire legacy. You can only imagine the heavy, emotional weight of being completely locked out of the very place you helped build. But it perfectly sets the stage for a highly emotional final act between the artist and his adopted home.
That final resolution finally arrives in April of 1972. The political climate had cooled down a bit, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences reaches out and invites him back to Los Angeles to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award. So after 2 solid decades away, an 83-year-old white-haired Charlie Chaplin steps back out onto the American stage, one last time.
And what happens next is just incredible. It's the longest standing ovation in the history of the Academy Awards. People are on their feet. They are cheering. They are literally weeping. At that moment, all the politics, all the paranoia, all that anger from the 1950s completely washed away. America remembered the joy, the laughter, and the shared humanity of the Tramp. That massive outpouring of love really healed that 20-year rift. Chaplin went back to Switzerland at peace, living out his final years quietly with his wife Una until he passed away on Christmas Day in 1977 at the age of 88. He proved beyond a doubt that a poor kid from the streets could truly achieve immortality through art. Which brings us to our final provocative thought for this explainer. Can a character that was literally born out of pure desperation, from a chaotic 30-minute scramble in a sweaty dressing room,
actually outlast the politics, the paranoia, and the deep divisions of any era? Well, the crazy history of Charlie Chaplin tells us that while the political weather is always going to change, true art that speaks to the shared struggles of the human heart, it never really dies. Definitely something to think about the next time you see the silhouette of a little man with a cane walking down a dusty road.